how did everything play out over the past, 2.5 years as you watched it all happen? Did anything surprise you? Happen differently? Did it happen too easily? Like what did you see as you watched it all play out?
Well, I never make predictions because I'm not good at it, but I could see kind of the road that we were going down in the direction. And let me just talk for a second about a way that people can understand how bad this was. And that is, we got data now for the Pfizer vaccine, and the way, when they gave these vaccines emergency use authorization, the public really had no access to the data because the company doesn't have to share it except with the regulators. We knew the regulators, who I know are corrupt, were looking at the data and were hell-bent on making sure that this mass vaccination program went forward. And let me step back for a second. You know this from reading my book, that the reason they had to kill the really efficacious therapeutic medicines like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, and there's literally hundreds of studies now, peer-reviewed, published studies, including placebo-controlled studies, that show that those medications have a profound impact. They reduce hospitalizations, they reduce serious illnesses and deaths by around 70 to 95%. And we knew this very, very early on. But the government, people like Fauci, had to kill those therapeutics. Why do they have to do that? Because there's a little known federal law that says that if there is a existing licensed drug licensed for any purpose that proves itself efficacious against the target disease, it is illegal to give an emergency use authorization to a vaccine to treat that same disease. So if anybody had admitted that hydroxychloroquine is even marginally effective, it would be or ivermectin, it would be illegal for them to license those vaccines. And that was a $100 billion enterprise for them. And as you know, NIH owns half the patent for the Moderna vaccine, which they put in the front of the pipeline. They waived animal studies, and they're going to get half the royalties. So this is tens of billions of dollars in royalties. And not only does the agency get the royalty, but individuals who work for Anthony Fauci, loyal lieutenants who he designates, are each able, and there's at least 4 and maybe 6 of them, they keep this very secret, they each get royalty, what they call patent margin rights. So they're going to collect royalties of $150,000 a year forever, potentially, from those vaccines. So there's a tremendous amount of money involved, not only and power, not only for people like Bill Gates who invested in those vaccines, but also for the agency and even government officials. Now, here's what we know. We got, when the Pfizer vaccine, BioNTech vaccine, got its approval, FDA had to release the data upon which it was basing that approval. So it was the clinical trial data. Here's the first trick that they did, really outrageous. If you remember at the beginning, Anthony Fauci was telling everybody, well, we're going to approve this and we're going to rush to market very quickly. We're going to keep the studies going for 5 years because we recognize that there are long-term impacts from vaccines, dangerous impacts, injuries with long diagnostic horizons, injuries with long incubation periods that you will not see in a month or 2 months or 5 months. In fact, there's a 2002 tape of Anthony Fauci out there right now that says you got to go at least 12 years between the clinical trial and actually mass vaccination programs because there are injuries that do not show up until a decade later. And you could have, in his words, mayhem if you try to move faster. So he said, okay, we're going to do 5 years of study. What do? As soon as they started those clinical trials, they started seeing injuries and they started seeing waning efficacy, very fast waning efficacy. And so they shut down the clinical trials after 2 months and they vaccinated the placebo group. Now, that is scientific fraud on its face. The FDA should have marched them out of town if it was a functioning agency and laughed at them. But instead, it granted the license and they ended the study with FDA approval. So now we will never know what the long-term impacts of that, because the placebo group is gone. They did that after 2 months. But they then, when they went to FDA to get their license, it's the only one that was approved at that time. They gave them 6 months of data. So even though they ended the study after 2 months, they told them what happened to the people who got vaccinated early and people who got vaccinated late. And here's the key metric is all-cause mortality. It's the only thing people should have really been focused on. And there's a graph called S5 in those, which are now publicly available in Pfizer's submission to FDA. And if you look at that graph and at the language that follows, what you'll see is this. And this is very simple for people to understand. They gave 22,000 vaccines approximately to people in the vaccine group and 22,000 vaccine. And then there were 22,000 people in the placebo group who received a fake vaccine. After 6 months, there was 1 COVID death in the vaccine group and 2 COVID deaths in the placebo group. So that allowed Pfizer and FDA to tell the public that the vaccine is 100% effective, which they did. Dr. Fauci and everybody else said that from the beginning. Gates, the president, it's 100% effective because the number 2 is 100% greater than the number 1.
Hey, it's Brian Rose, founder of the DeFi Academy. I've told you my 4-week crypto bootcamp is amazing, but don't take my word for it. This is what my students are saying.
The DeFi Academy was an amazing experience for me. It took me totally out of my comfort zone.
In this course, I was challenged, I was held accountable, and pushed to do things that honestly weren't always easy.
It's been phenomenal, and I can't believe we're already up on our 4 weeks. It has flown by.
Going through this DeFi accelerator by far was one of the best courses I've taken.
You do this course, you really get into the nitty-gritty of the activities that will make you comfortable with decentralized finance.
Thank you so much to Brian and everyone at London Real and the DeFi Academy for even putting together an amazing course like this.
Anybody else that wants to do it, please sign up. It is well worth the money.